go back to the book Gone with the Wind, and most people who've seen the movie just have it's a completely different animal than the book, which actually the war is quite early in that book. That Reconstruction is this unwieldy, like, just mess.
To what extent is Gone with the Wind a pivotal part of the play?
A good extent. I think that we worked originally on the piece as Rachel had sort of set about making four pieces. We did 4 sort of acts, and Gone with the Wind was one of those 4. In this version, as we had audience responses and needed to cut it down so extensively to make sure it would fit in the Travers program, and we ended up using Gone with the Wind as one of the two large chunks with a beautiful interweaving story of Carrie Campbell, which was originally the last chunk. Gone with the Wind is, I think, the first half of the play, really, at this point.
It's a major part, and it kind of ends up being the very fun, delicious allegory that I think helps you look at the later sections, which are contemporary, which are a lot more subtle. That I would say is the role that it serves.
Basically, like southern white Southerners were completely disenfranchised, were not allowed to vote. All the blacks were brought in to vote 6 times, to vote for people to...
This is the portrayal in the book.
Yeah, in the book. There's all this craziness that creates huge racial tension, creates these violent tensions between groups of people that we're still seeing these ripples of 100 years later, over 150 years later, of like this huge racial tension. Yeah. That just has resonated over 100 years.
And the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, is a heroic force in the book. And on one hand, you can write it off, but on the other hand, you have to note that this is probably the most famous piece of Southern literature and amongst the most famous pieces of American literature ever, and it is written from the losing side, and the losing side is a major portion of our country still. And at least in 1936, when the book was published, to think that the KKK were there to just save the white women from the evil freed slaves makes you pause and go, well, you can understand why the racial divisions continue in our country today.
Do you think someone could come and watch Architecting, having not read the book or seen the film? Would they still gain something from seeing the play?
I believe so, absolutely. I think that we're clear enough. The character of Margaret Mitchell is a big character in that section, the writer, the author of Gone with the Wind, who I actually knew nothing about when we started the project. And I think that through an exploration of her, knowing that most people don't know anything about really her life, I think that she becomes the gateway for people into the novel. And I think that Rachel's done kind of an amazing job of shaping the way in which her Gone with the Wind explodes out of her imagination, and that it's this woman who we've transplanted her and put her in modern day Hollywood with this director, this crazy Hollywood director who's trying to make a new Hollywood version of Gone with the Wind, and trying to get the rights and trying to make it this big, sweeping, beautiful, money making machine, and just getting her, this beautiful little soul who's trying to figure out why that she's a racist now, that she's everybody's sort of forgotten everything about her except that Scarlett O'Hara is this very sexy, beautiful creature, and that she's I get to play Scarlett, and that the book is probably pretty racist, and that
That's it. I mean,
that's all.
You're left with Scarlett O'Hara as this is a line from the play, but America's sweetheart of the, which of course is the British actress Vivian Leigh. That even if I had never read the book or seen the movie until we began work on this process. My parents actually discouraged me from doing it because as good liberals they felt that the book was very
also
racist.
as civil rights lawyers.
Yes. Yes, that definitely played a role.
Whereas my mother, when she found out we were doing this play, was like, "Oh, I've never read it," and then immediately became ensconced in this, a lot of it actually feels like reading a romance novel, and it is very seductive. It's extremely seductive, and But I do, to answer your question, I do think that it is very accessible for somebody who hasn't. I think it's actually an interesting little introduction.
Yeah. The reconstruction of a nation and what a human being does when their world totally disappears out from under them is very much the point of Gone with the Wind. And then when we get into later sections, which are really about the reconstruction of these two small individuals from Arkansas, that epic, sweeping idea ends up being boiled down into kind of this small, tiny crisis of what to do when you can't go on living your life the way you have been.
I was really interested to hear that she took 10 years to write it.
Yes.
Must have been an incredibly complex project for her.
She was like a housewife. I mean,
She was, and she'd been a journalist before, so she had been a writer in the world. But of course, she's writing at a time when women did not necessarily do this, and was quite shy. And when we went down to Atlanta as part of research for the trip, we talked to someone who had known her, she'd been at their wedding. Lucy's parents,
No way.
grandparents.
Oh, cool.
And he just kept referring to her as mousy little Peggy Mitchell. And so it's, by all accounts, she was not anyone who someone expected this novel to come forth from. And she hid it and was asked repeatedly whether she had anything that she wanted to publish, and she told this publisher, no. And then at the last minute, she calls it, in a moment of weakness, I have written a novel. She handed him a stack that I think was like probably this big of like 40 something manila envelopes, each with several versions of a chapter in it. And Scarlett was named Pansy originally in it. So the editors certainly worked on the novel a lot.
Scarlett's a little bit more zhuzhy than Pansy.
And she actually went blind for a brief period after the publishing because of the anxiety of being so famous, and the fame was never something that she wanted, and really, I think, proved to be a nightmare in her life. So, and her house has been burnt down and rebuilt a bunch of times in Atlanta. I mean, it's her mythology alone is pretty fascinating.
And just being somebody who has to do, being faced with, she never was, but being faced with a contemporary, the way our country has moved now to a place of this like extreme political correctness about her novel, about what was it racist to write something that was deeply personal and honest as far as her experiences were concerned, and the people she spoke to, the white people that she spoke to, and she researched black dialects, like slave dialects, extensively. And so to what degree can we hold her accountable for our current perception of racism?
How do you work as a company?
We're all writers. Is one of the things. Basically, anybody that's in the room is puts on that mantle when we're working, and so we'll go in with a nugget that Rachel has given us, and then create stories on top of that, or movement sequences, dances, songs, all that kind of stuff that is generated by the company on our feet, and then after we sort of developed this relationship with NTS and
the National Theatre
Scotland has been amazing in this process, and has really just changed the way we're able to work, that we were able to pay ourselves for a 2-month rehearsal period in a beautiful space in New York,
which is unheard of even at the most professional levels.
There's just no funding. There's no support from our country, and so to have NTS there was incredible. So we had 2 months where we did a lot of writing. We had Davey Anderson, who was a resident director at the National Theatre Scotland, came in and wrote and made music and gave input with us. Basically just became a member of the team for 2 months. People would, actors and Rachel and various people would try to put together scripts and present them and say, what do you think about this combination of things? So it's just everybody people who do not think that they're writers writing their asses off, and a lot of stuff on the feet.